part person, but I am, um, and it's so much more fun when you're taking kids there. Talking about Disney World, by the way, and how people would wear masks there right now in the 90-degree weather. Um, yes. So I went there. I had a friend working on a project in Orlando, and it was the year after Harry Potter World opened up, and the train and all the rides and all the everything, and that is fun. If you are like a Harry Potter fan at all, it's fun. I acted like a complete nerd. My dad, when he went to Disney World, when he was like 11, it was right after Epcot. I like Epcot. I like the going and around to all the different countries and eating, and that's just fun. I remember the last time I went there, I was in middle school, and so looking at like all the stuff, like all the other stuff that's closed, but it's like still there. Yeah, where are y'all? Okay, I'm gonna share my screen, and I'm going to try to make this part, the talking part of class. Yeah, you might want to close that if people. I know there's a big event going on across the street, and I want to encourage involvement in that if you want to. And so I'm going to go through kind of introduction to Unit 2, which is what we're starting today, and just go over some of the logistics and kind of introduce the topics that we're going to be looking at in your videos and in your workbook this week. And then Wednesday, I want you to make sure you're bringing what you need to class to watch your videos and do the work at the same time, as well as your workbook if you need to. Actually, this week is workbook only. So there's no videos for this week. It's just we're working through chapter 2 in the workbook. And so you'll need to bring your workbook to class and make sure that you have that to kind of do the projects with me, with you on Wednesday. And then Friday, you of course, is your online day. You're on your own. So you, of course, have this lab to work on if you don't have the computer programs on your own computer. So use that class time. But Unit 2 worksheet, at this point, I'm still going to make them do on Monday, September 7th, even though that's Labor Day. We're not going to be here, but just get it in by the end of the day. Then don't wait to Monday to do it. Do it Wednesday and Friday. And then I think as we get going, things might be due like the end of day Fridays, now that we have some computer time available. So if you're following along, you can get to this via Blackboard. I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick roll, because if I don't, I get scolded, because we're tracking people. We have to know where you are at all times. It does help if there is some type of incident, they at least have a way to know who to contact. There was good news on Friday. Do y'all get the emails on Friday that kind of give you the head counts and such? Okay. There are no confirmed cases on campus right now. Actually, I sent an email right after that said there was a one. Really? Okay. Okay. Yes. So I think because they're removed, I'm saying there's none. But there are some quarantinings going on. There are a few of those things. There are some people that I think they're testing everybody if you have like anything. So doing better than a lot of other places right now. So let's just try to keep it up. I don't know why this is taking so long. Okay, so I know Kiari, I think they're all going there. I got emails from them. Billy, you're here. Emily, you're here. Grace is not here. I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I think a lot of them are going to the march right over there, which I'm gonna try to let y'all out if you want to go participate too. But I appreciate you coming because we don't have class next Monday. So Bryant, you're here. Ben, you're here. Marguerite, you're here in person. Marguerite, do you like to be called Marge or Marguerite?
I go by Marge.
Marge, okay. I will call you Marge. Jarrett, there you are. Harrison, you are here. All right. Okay. Well, let's get into a little bit of an introduction. I just want to kind of familiarize yourself. That's kind of how I'm going to do as we're going through this. I really like to set this this course up as a kind of a self-paced course where I'll introduce subjects, and I will be here as you kind of guide yourself through the steps that I've prepared for you to do. I think it's the best way of learning this stuff because people learn at different paces when it comes to these types of programs. And so you do have chapter 2 worksheet that's going to be due after the weekend. So you have part 1, which is 12 true or false short answer questions. And then you have, you're looking at graphics 2 sheet. Y'all don't need to do that one unless you want to. You want to learn Illustrator yet? Okay, so here it is. Sorry. Y'all have 13 true, false, or short answer questions. And then you have part 2 gives you A through F with some steps. So in this unit, you're going to be learning to manipulate some photographs. And I've put links here. These are, if you click on this file right here, you are taken to these 3 photos that the book gives you. And so you can go to my Google Drive and you can do this and you can push download and it will download these 3 photos for you to use. You may also use, if you have photos of your own that fill the requirements that you might want to do, you can do your own photos and it'll make sense after we kind of show you what you're going to be doing with photos. But these are ones that you can use. They go exactly with the book. They're the photos that the book uses. But what I ask you to do in A through F are a few different steps that just replicate what you are learning through what the book is asking you to do. We're working on cropping using the rule of thirds while maintaining the original resolution, adjusting color and tone, removing unwanted objects with spot healing brush, removing unwanted objects with the content aware patch, and sharpening images, and then adjusting color with saturation to black and white. Okay, so these things are pretty simple, but there's also a lot of things you can do to finesse your abilities with this. So Unit 2 objectives, kind of went over that a little bit. Understanding image resolution and size. These are things that sometimes can be hard to understand when you're just getting into photo editing. Cropping something, taking something from one picture to another and making sure they match in resolution and size is sometimes an issue with some people. Understanding resolution and size is sometimes so I have a little video we're going to watch that explains it pretty easily. Straighten and cropping images, adjusting tonal ranges of an image, using the spot healing brush, the content aware patch, the clone stamp, being able to touch up old photographs by removing digital artifacts from an image. These would be, scratches, dust, that type of stuff when you're trying to clean up something, and using filters to kind of give it the finishing touch on pictures. So key terms that I want you to really understand are resolution. And resolution, when you're talking about Photoshop, refers to the number of pixels per unit of physical length. So you sometimes see PPI, that's pixels per inch, or DPI, that's kind of what I've grown up hearing. DPI is dots per inch. It kind of refers to the same thing. But pixels, everybody should know what a pixel is. They're the little squares that actually make up what you see. So if you zoom in on an image close enough, the person's face you see is actually made up of a lot of tiny squares. And so when you are affecting the resolution, you're affecting the number of dots that make up something. So when something is considered pixelated, it doesn't have enough dots to match the image size. And the image size is the physical dimensions of an image if printed. Okay, so you of course can have on Photoshop an image that is 32 inches by 62 inches, but you have it on your computer where it's small enough you can see it on your screen, right? Because you've zoomed in enough or zoomed out enough. And that one is going to be very high resolution if it can be printed at that size. If you have that image blown up and you zoom in, it's going to take a lot of zooming ins to get to where you can see the actual pixels. So resolution and image size are two different things. Image size refers to what it would be if it were printed. Resolution is how many dots per inch it is on your screen. Okay, so does changing the resolution affect the file size? And that is only when the pixel dimensions change. So this is kind of convoluted, but just follow me. So for example, you have a 7 by 7 inch image at 300 ppi. What does 300 ppi mean? Okay, so we have 300 pixels in one square inch. Okay, y'all get that? Okay, 300 ppi or dpi is the printable resolution. So if you want to crop an image to where you can print it and it's the quality you need for a printed image, it needs to be 300 ppi, dpi. Okay, if it's just going to be on the web, it can be 75. So what needs more pixels, the web or printed? Printed, okay? So those are just standard numbers to remember. So if you are doing something for class and you are knowing that it's going to be printed, you need to have it at least 300 resolution for the size that it is. Now you can change the resolution to 300, but say it starts off as a 7 by 5, a 5 by 7 picture, but it was a 100 resolution. You change the resolution to 300. Is it still going to be full quality at 5 by 7? No, it's going to shrink its size. Okay, and so if you change either the size in the inches or the PPI while keeping the pixel dimensions at 2100, the file size does not change, but the clarity might. That's when you get pixelated images. You can only go down in all the numbers without losing quality. If you take a 7 by 7 inch photo and try to make it 30 by 30 inch at 300, the resolution will decrease. Okay, so does that make sense? All right, there is a quick little video that I wanted to, that kind of demonstrates it. It's just 2 minutes.
Today we're going to talk about image size and resolution.
He has a nice thick accent, but it's real quick.
This is a pixel. These are 10 pixels, and these are 100 pixels. So our image is going to be 10 pixels wide by 10 pixels high, and these are called pixel dimensions. Now let's say that this is 1 inch, and here we have 10 pixels per inch. This is called resolution or pixel density. If we want to create a circle, we would change the color of these pixels. To have a smoother circle, we need a higher resolution. Let's try 20 pixels per inch. Now we have a much smoother result. But we're still working within 1 inch here. What if we want to work with 2 inches? If we just increase the size of our image, it's still gonna be the same because the resolution is now smaller. You now have 5 pixels per inch instead of 10 pixels per inch. And the pixel dimensions are still the same, 10 pixels by 10 pixels. So we just learned something here. Increasing the image size does not affect its resolution or pixel density, and it does not affect its pixel dimensions, the total number of pixels in our image. It's just like a rubber band. If I stretch it like that, it gets bigger, but it still has the same number of atoms. It still has the same mass. However, if we increase both the size and the pixel density, then we'll get a clearer circle. See, now the image size is 2 inches by 2 inches, and the pixel density is 10 pixels per inch. What about the pixel dimensions? Well, how many pixels do we have now? We have 20 pixels by 20 pixels, so this number has increased. As you can see, we need to add pixels to our image if we want to make it more clear. Let's take a real photo and open it in Photoshop. Now let's go to Image, Image Size. Here where it says Dimensions, you can see that this image is 4,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels. Our image is made of this number of pixels, and the resolution is 180 pixels per inch. Make sure Resample is unchecked, and we can use the width and height values to change the print dimensions of the image. Let's set our units to inches. Now, if we increase the image size, the total number of pixels will not be affected because the resolution is decreasing. Let's set it back to 180 pixels per inch. And if we check Resample and make sure this link is activated to maintain the aspect ratio, and then increase the image size, then Photoshop will add these pixels. You can see the dimensions here are increasing.
Now Photoshop can add pixels to some things because it kind of uses content awareness where it says, well, this is next to a black pixel, so I'm going to add some more black right here. But it fuzzies up things sometimes, okay? Here's someone talking about 72 PBI myth. So if you need more clarification, there's tons of online videos out there for it. But when in doubt, don't try to increase pixels or image size if you know that it's going to be printed. And if you are taking an image, if you're knocking out something from one photo and you're putting it in another, make sure they're relatively the same size. Or the apple you knock out of this photo to put in a fruit basket over here is going to be blurred when it's put in that fruit basket of this image over here is one bigger file size, okay? And that's just a common beginner's mistake. So next, you're going to work a little bit with straightening and cropping an image. You can do this through the crop tool. And so this is what you're going to be doing through the workbook. You're taking an image that's scanned. A lot of times, if you're working with older photos, you're scanning them in. There's a lot of scanning apps on your phone, and it does a lot of smart cropping for you these days. So, but if that's not an issue, if you have a picture that's scanned in and it's a little crooked, you want to make it straight, you can do that with the crop tool. And there's just some easy tips that it's going to show you how to do. You also use the crop tool if you're taking a photo, but you want to change its focus or change its look. In photography, you're taught to take pictures via the rule of thirds. And so in cropping, the crop tool gives you the rule of thirds right here for you. And so you can kind of use that as your guide to cropping in a photo to make it more aesthetically pleasing. And so use that as your guide. You can see this picture here. They just kind of zoomed in on it a little bit, put this painter on the rule of thirds in the upper quadrant, and they have made it a little bit more visually interesting because of doing that. Yes, sir?
So say it's like one that's cropped, like one specific thing in the photo, like how do I do that without it cropping the whole picture? Because I remember like I have some issues with that. Like I'll try to crop one thing, but it crops the whole picture.
Give me kind of example of what you mean. Like,
let's say like I added image to, say like I have like a photo, right?
Okay.
I added image to that photo, and I want to crop just the image that I put in.
Okay. That's when you would probably want to do it before you add it, or you would add it in another layer and then work with that photo in its own layer itself. And we'll learn about how to set up layers and use those for, and so you're only editing parts of the photo that are just like on top of each other, but the bottom that you started off with isn't affected by what you do, okay? And so you do that through layers or working in another document before you throw it in there. Yeah, okay? It depends on what you're doing, which one is better to do, okay? So a few more things. We're going to work on adjusting color and tone. And for doing that, we're going to use levels and curves are going to be the things that you're going to be using. Now, I have some videos here. I'm not going to go into the levels and curves video because they're each a little bit, they explain it in detail. But if you're interested in learning more about it in detail, more than the book or more than or more than this right here explains in itself, then I want you to watch those individual videos. But we're going to watch a few seconds of this, which talks about using levels and curves.
Here we have a photo that's underexposed, which means not enough light was captured when the photo was taken. If we adjust the levels, we can make the midtones and highlights brighter, so the details are easier to see.
You can do similar things with levels and curves. They
First,
just
go ahead and create
do
an
it in a
adjustment
different
layer.
way.
Make sure to choose the levels option from the menu. When the properties panel appears, you should see a graph in the center. This is called the histogram. The histogram shows you data about the shadows, midtones, and highlights in your image. You can make adjustments using the sliders below. Now, this might seem a little strange at first, but don't worry. With some hands-on experience, you'll start to get the hang of it. In our example, we're going to move the highlight slider so it's where the histogram actually ends, and then move the midtone slider a little to the left, which will make the image a bit lighter overall.
And that right there is almost all you need to know when it comes to using levels. It will adjust a photo if you bring this right here from over here to where the histogram starts, okay? Sometimes your histogram might start right here and you just need to adjust it right here. Sometimes it might be right here and everything's all broken up. Then you just barely move it and then you adjust the middle one until you get the view look. But what I was taught when I started doing this is the easiest way to get a nice adjustment when the lighting's not completely right in a photo. Just make sure this is dragged to where the histogram starts and then adjust the middle one a little bit.
Every image is unique, so when you start doing this on your own, you will see some big differences between histograms. Basically, the key is to target the endpoints with the shadow and highlight sliders. Then you can adjust the midtones depending on what you need, for example, lighter or darker. Just be careful not to move the sliders too far past the endpoints. This can cause you to lose detail in your image, also known as clipping. As always, if you do end up making a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You can just move the slider back or press Ctrl-Z or Command-Z to undo.
Okay,
Let's take a look
switch
at
over
how
to
it works.
curves. So curves is another adjustment option you can do.
Adjustment layer.
And this
This
one is
button
one
shows
that has a
curves.
little bit more
When the
power.
panel appears,
You do a
you
lot
should
more
see a
to it, but it
diagonal
takes
line
more
that has
finesse
two
to kind of
beginning
learn
endpoints.
exactly what you're doing.
This is where you'll make your adjustments. Of course, it looks very different from the levels interface, but it has the same arrangement of shadows on the left and highlights on the right. To add a point, just click anywhere on the line, then drag up, down, left, or right to see the effect it has. One of the simplest things you can do with curves is to increase the contrast. To do this, you'll need to drag the curve down towards the left, then click to add a second point and drag it up near the right. See how we've created a gentle curve that follows the upward slope of the line? By dragging it down near the shadows and up near the highlights, we've intensified those parts of the image. If we wanted to decrease the contrast, we could just do the opposite. Drag it down here instead, and then up over here. Just be careful to avoid big steep curves that don't follow the slope of the line. As with levels, you can end up losing a lot of detail in your image.
Unless you're going for something that looks
While
like
you're
that.
still getting the hang of curves, you might want to check out the presets menu too. Here you'll find lots of built-in up. Now we've lost a lot of detail.
Okay, so
before
I'm gonna go
making
into this a little
extreme
bit.
adjustments. Black and white or grayscale image, you can see that it reduces the intensity instead.
All right, I'm not going to go into that. So if you want to keep watching this, it does go into doing color adjustments via this, which in properties, you can adjust the hue, which adjusts the type of colors that are actually in there, the saturation of the whole picture. If you bring saturation all the way down to 0, what does it do to a photo? Black and white's it, okay? And that's one way to black and white it. Another way to black and white it is to go and actually do color mode black and white, okay? So there's always, like I said, three ways to do something in Photoshop. All right, so just this kind of gives you visuals of what we just saw in the video. Another thing that you're going to be doing is the spot healing brush. And this is a tool that removes blemishes and other imperfections in Photoshop by sampling pixels around it. And so in your book, you are given some photos of some people looking over at a bridge or something, and you take people out of it. And the ways that you can do that are through the spot healing brush or the content aware patches. And there are two videos here. They're about 2 minutes each, but I just want to kind of show you what that looks like. And this guy right here has a lot of short tutorials if you're ever interested in that.
Comm, welcome to this Photoshop in 30 seconds tutorial, where the idea is that we have a Photoshop
Searching
tutorial
things on
in
his
30
page
seconds
can give you a
helps them
quick
out. So
kind of
always run
refresh
along.
of what it looks
Today
like.
we're going to talk about the spot healing brush in Photoshop. The spot healing brush, not the healing brush, the spot healing brush. This is the healing brush that I don't like as much, but it is much faster. You basically just click and Photoshop heals whatever it is that you have clicked.
It just kind of guesses by what's around it. So you're going to see here, it's guessing, but it's actually repeating those letters.
Scrawled into the side of this airplane. A couple things about this tool. We have some options. Number one, you can right click at any time and change the size and the hardness of your brush. You can also change the spacing, but not many people do that. I have that, so that's pretty cool. I can paint wherever. It's great. A lot of times I'm using healing. I like to do it on a new layer. Now, if you're doing it on a new layer, you want to make sure you have checked on sample all layers. The reason I like to do it on a new layer is because if I get rid of a big chunk like that and I don't like what's happening,
shows you a little bit.
Hide the layer, or sometimes you just want to reduce the opacity of a given layer, or you can just select everything on the layer, delete all the contents of the layer, and begin afresh. It gives me the option to mask the layer, all kinds of stuff like that, very non-destructive. So replace, which does a lot less healing and almost helps it behave a little bit more like the combination of a spot healing brush and a clone stamp tool. If you're getting close to an edge or something, you probably want to go with a mode like replace and not normal, where normal is going to really make things go wacky, funky, crazy. We don't like that. So content aware, in the spot healing brush, you can see you can grab big chunks of areas and heal them very quickly. Not the best heal job, but it's fast and it's fairly effective, I would say.
Now, I would say this is a good one to use. There's a lot of things that he would have to go back in and finesse in this. This is a good one to use if you're touching up like skin tone, like kind of want to smooth out someone's face. Then there's the content aware. I want to show you a little bit of an example of that real quick. Scroll through here.
Take a look at some feature tips. Something in Photoshop in about 30 seconds. It's pretty much
He goes in the
letter J, just like everything else in this little menu. Content aware move. It's a pretty simple tool. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not always incredibly effective. It really is going to depend on the image that you're using. It's not a tool that I go to very much, but I want to give you the option of using it and show you how it's used. First and foremost, it basically works. You drag a selection around something that you want to move, right? And then you're able to click and drag this and move it anywhere. And in theory, Photoshop is going to blend like her, right? It's going to blend her into this spot and fill the old spot automatically. You can see, move it over. It says, hey, do you want any last minute transformations? Whoops, I'm going to right click on it. I don't want to do any kind of transformation, so I'm going to hit the check icon, and it's going to go to work, and it's going to blend and do its thing. And you can see it fill the old area. And if I deselect, it sort of kind of blended her in, but it didn't do the best job. So that's the content aware move tool. You do have options like structure, which basically means the higher this number is, the more Photoshop can mess around with like the original structure of the photo, and the less, the more it's going to like preserve the integrity. But it seems like the lower this number is, generally speaking, the worse the blend and everything ends up coming out to be. Color, basically, the lower that is, the less it's going to mess around with the color. If you crank this all the way up to 10, all kinds of weird things happen. I've never really used that at 10 at all. And you can shut off the whole transform option if you don't want those transform handles to come up, which honestly, that's kind of the way I tend to roll. You also have the option to extend something. Now, this would be great, like if you're trying to extend a skyscraper, make it much larger than maybe other skyscrapers around, or maybe make a limo or some kind of SUV, like a stretch limousine. I can see this being useful for something like that. But extend basically is going to copy what you select, but not get rid of the old bit. Okay, so now we can sort of have 3 versions of her. And again, in theory, Photoshop is going to blend but you can see it really, I mean, it really doesn't do a great blend job. And even if you just select the stone and just select the girl, it ends up biting into, like it would bite in your hair and shoulder, arms, hips, legs, the edges of the rock, everything when it actually tries to blend this together. So in theory, the content aware move tool is a great idea. When you really start to use it, I'm not sure that it quite lives up to the hype of what it's supposed to do, but this is how you use it. Check it out, try it for yourself. There's some images that it works really well on and others where it's an absolute train wreck, but for now, that's it.
So I kind of like his approach to this. It's good for what it's good for, but it's not something you want to use all the time. It is, you see a lot of commercials these days where you see, you know, like, oh, you're out hand gliding with a friend and you want to get the friend out of the picture and the little app clicks on something and takes it out. It's the same concept, and a lot of apps are kind of building this, and it's not the most perfect blend, but kind of go back in if you want to take things out. I think it's a better tool for getting things out and then cleaning that up than maybe replacing it. So those are those two ways of changing: spot healing brush, content aware. Then the last thing that you can use to remove content or change content is the clone and stamp. And the clone and stamp are pretty simple. It's kind of how I learned first. They were one of the first tools out there to kind of extend things in a photo, make it look a little bit better. I'm going to skip on into this video.
For yourself, they're pretty simple. They honestly, you're probably not going to use them that often. It's much better to do something like create a new layer, clone up on this new layer, and then change the blend mode of the new layer. That way it's non-destructive. You can always change it back later if you decide to do that. Now, speaking of painting or cloning on a new layer, we have this sample option up here of current layer, current and below, or all layers. I typically work with current and below because what that means is
I'm going to skip over here.
Colors and things from that document. I just tell them I all can select it, and then you can go into your document and you can paint them in there just like that.
So with the cloning tool, you can take things and it paints it exactly. So it doesn't look at things from around the image. You're saying clone this black part over here and put it on this red part, okay? Like he did with that one image.
There, just like my next one, maybe I sample from this little viewfinder. So here I can paint the viewfinder there.
So he's taking the picture and putting it in different places.
Painting. So that's kind of neat, but not really something I use all that much. The main thing about the clone source panel is this little rotation option here. This is great if you're working along the edge of somebody's chin or something like that. Let's say where you need to add or get rid of some rotation. Ignore the image rotating. It always kind of does that as a little heads up. Example, let's say I sample this very straight edge here. You can see that it's automatically going to rotate the bit that's being cloned. This is great, like I said, for following anything that has a little bit of curve or angle to it. You can find the angle and you can keep, working it around the angle and around the corner and around the corner with each bit of cloning that you're doing until you have a perfectly cloned edge. So that's really super useful when you go and you start really using this clone stamp tool in practical applications. Now, you can reset the rotate by just hitting this little reset arrow, boom, back to 0 degrees.
All right, so clone is basically exactly what it says. It clones, and you'll be working through some of that in your video. And then the last thing is sharpening. And I'm not going to go into sharpening that much right now, but sharpening is something that I don't really use it that often unless something is just a little bit blurry and I want to try to get the lines a little bit sharper. You can over sharpen pretty easily, and I'll show you just one little example of how over sharpening works. The sharpen tool,
there's not a lot you can do about it.
I'm just going to kind of scroll through where I want you to see how an over sharpened thing can look. Okay, here it is. Come back. Where'd you go? All right, so if you over sharpen something, it starts picking up all the lines and details and tries to make them darker and stand out more. And you can get these like real weird burnt out parts of an image. And so sharpening, you can do it, but do it with finesse and do it with it doesn't always do like the best. If it's a little bit fuzzy, you want to give a little bit more cleaner lines, it just gives a little bit more defined lines. But don't go to the point where it's picking up lines you don't want defined. And you'll see exactly how to do that in your tutorials. And but sometimes it can add and make a little bit more interest to the photo. So any questions about these tools that I want you to start learning this week? Bring your book to class on Wednesday, and I want you to work through stuff while you're here with me. And then Friday, you will finish those, and that will be how we're going to do Unit 2. Unit 3 will pick back up with some video tutorials along with the book, but this one is just book stuff. Yes, sir.
Oh, it's all books, right?
Sorry.
The worksheet will be all books, right?
Yes, the worksheet number 2 is all just book stuff this time.
We need slides too.
The slides basically come from what you're going to be looking in the book. Okay, so that was just kind of introducing and making you aware of what to really pay close attention to in the book. All right, so if you have any questions, let me know. If not, I'll see you Wednesday. See you Wednesday, Marge and Harrison. All right.